BMW Motorcycle Owners of America present the Short Wheelbase Podcast. With members in all 50 states, Canada, and across the globe, the BMW MOA invites you to ride inspired. Learn more about membership benefits, including roadside assistance, tire hazard protection, and more at bmwmoa.org. The Short Wheelbase Podcast is also brought to you by Boxer 2 Valve, supplier of quality OEM and aftermarket parts and specialty tools, and by Air Support BMW, offering premium driveline rebuilding and performance enhancements for your air-cooled BMW.
So here we are, episode 2 of the Short Wheelbase Podcast. Darren, how you doing today?
I am excellent. I'm a little weary, a little groggy after a 3-day round trip to Orlando, Florida and back to pick up this motorcycle behind me. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. But other than that, double thumbs up.
Cool. Well, we got a good show today. We are going to have an excerpt at the end here from Leo Goff from the longer podcast that you do. We're going to go through our garage update as always, and Darren is going to be talking about his Survivor Series. This week's Survivor Series is a 1980. Sorry, what is it, Darren? This is 70.
81 RT. 1981 RT. R100 RT.
Cool. I got the pictures up and I started reading his other two bikes, but we'll get to that later. So
yes.
To kick it off, let's do the garage update.
Let's start with you.
Start this off here
with you.
Yeah. Haven't done a whole lot with the conversion bike. Last time we talked, I was going to put some bags on it and go for a camping trip. New job happened. Camping trip didn't happen. But I did spend some time getting the headlight working, which wasn't working. So now I can actually ride at nighttime.
Excellent.
Also in the mail, I got these lovely heads from you, actually. You picked these up for me and sent them out. These will be going on the R90/6 project that I'm going to be working on. And it's kind of apropos that I have them here today because in the excerpt later, we're going to be going over heads.
Yeah,
that's exactly. Really all I got. I'm going to let you take it away because you've got a lot cooler news than me.
All right. Well, we'll get to that in a second. Let me just ask you, though, about the heads. So those are going on which bike?
The R90/6 that I'm going to be building up as a bit of a scrambler.
Okay. All right. I wasn't sure if those were going to go on your conversion or what.
Well, unless the heads totally go on me on the conversion, they'll go on the /6.
And what's your plan for those? Are you just going to run them and hope for the best, see how they are, or are you going to send them off sort of preemptively and maybe have somebody refurbish them for you, or what?
So they look like they're in pretty good shape. So I may instill the expert sage advice of some of the local Airhead experts out here in Colorado. I don't know who I'm going to take them to, but they look really good. So I'm inclined to just run them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'd rather run them and find out they're good, and rather than send them off and spend a whole lot of money to find out they were good in the first place. So, yeah, I'm probably just going to run them, but take them to an expert and maybe get some secondary opinions on it.
Yeah, and as we know, removing the heads not a big chore on the Airheads. So, yeah, if you decide you need to, pop them off, and yeah, you've got any number of folks out there to help you out. Okay, so garage update for me. Behind me, you can see partially in the camera view is a green, Nürburgring R75/6. And this is the one I picked up in Germany. Purchased it back in April of this year. And then it was a whirlwind experience getting it shipped down to Stefan Knopf in Heidelberg, getting it serviced, tagged, titled, inspected. My wife and I flew to Heidelberg, rode around Europe for about 10 to 12 days. And then after that, the bike got put on a shipping container. It arrived in Orlando about a week ago, and that's why I'm so groggy, tired, and a little crazy right now from all that. Went down, did a round trip, and picked it up. So we've got a new kid in town in the garage, the R75/6. This is a 76 model, Euro spec. So the real, of course, if you're wondering what makes a bike of this era Euro spec, first thing, obviously, you're going to see kilometers on the speedometer. But then the second thing you'll notice, if you hadn't already, and you can't see it in the film or in the camera view here, rather, is there are no reflectors. So no reflectors on the fork and no reflectors on the back of the motorcycle where the license plate is. So that's one telltale sign this is a Euro edition. Also, this bike has a kickstart. I'm not sure if that was delivered.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. As an option. It seems like some of these bikes that were delivered in Germany and Europe had the Kickstarter on them. And I will say this, it works great. The kick shaft is not bent, so the kick arm is not sticking out as some do. And since this is a smaller displacement motorcycle, the 750 kicks over real easy. So I've got some work to do on it. I'll tell you one quick story about the motorcycle. We'll be digging into this and talking about it a little bit more in some upcoming podcast episodes. But when I got there to pick up the motorcycle, got to Stefan's garage in Heidelberg, look at the bike. Oh man, great. Everything's here. I turned the key and nothing, no headlights, no dash lights. And I was like, hey, what's up, dude? And he's
just
like,
what you want in a foreign country, right?
Yeah, exactly. And he's like, I don't know. Maybe I left the key on. I said, okay, maybe you did. That's a legit, it can happen, especially because the headlight doesn't come on. You could have just left it on. So he swapped out the battery, still nothing. I mean, zero. And so I had been flying for about, 22 hours, no sleep. First thing I did, I took off the gas tank, and I'd recalled I had it when I was putting one of my other bikes together. Hey, sometimes you might have a short or disconnection at the starter relay underneath the tank, maybe a bad connection, something like that. So I take the tank off. Nick, the first thing I see immediately is a jerry-rigged starter relay laying on the top of the starter cover. No. So yeah, I mean the wiring was, pretty
just sitting on the cover.
Pretty much, yeah. It was under the tank, just laying on the starter cover. And I think you'll know this on a /6 of this era. It's called a cricket relay, so it's a sort of
the cricket relay.
Yeah, it's kind of silver. It's not the standard plastic one you see on a /7 and later. And I looked at Steph and I said, look, this is not the right relay on here. Somebody just wired this thing in, and he had it running the day before. But thankfully, it decided to shit the bed there, not when I was on the road. So long story short, I had brought a spare starter relay, thankfully. And my dogs just came in. And so he insisted we take it to the dealer. The gentleman's name's Volker, and as one of the BMW dealers in and around his area, one of the few ones, he said, actually, who still work on Airheads, and they had done the prep, service, inspection, and everything on the bike. And he insisted we take it over there. And I said, okay, that's fine. I was in no rush. We took it over the next morning, of course, popped it in, all good. So I guess the lesson here is, how many times have we carried spare parts and never used them? So a lot of times they'll just sit under the seat or in a little bag or something like that, and you never end up needing them. Well, this was a case, I packed all these spares, little electrical components, you could easily fit it in a small bag. Why not carry them? And it turns out I needed it. So garage update, the bike's good. This is going to be kind of my winter project going through it. Everything that needs attention, which there's a lot of stuff on here, but the bike rides good, everything works. So I'll probably tootle around on it for another month or two. Then when the winter hits, put it on the lift and go through it like I always do. So thumbs up on the green machine, Nick.
Awesome. It looks fantastic. I'm excited to see more photos of it soon here. While you were there, though, I know this is Airhead adjacent. What was the best road that you rode on? Because you did quite a bit of riding while you were there, right?
We did. That's a great question. I would have to say the first couple days, although it was a little bit rainy, we went from Heidelberg across the Rhine River into France, and we were went to a town called Repsweiler, France. Boy, don't hold me on that pronunciation, but it was it was really neat, and you'll appreciate this, I think, because it had a feel of it felt like Pennsylvania a little bit. So rolling hills, some nice agricultural areas, real wooded rural area. We were staying at Airbnb, so we weren't going to big towns or cities even. I mean, that's kind of my wife and I, that's our MO. So riding through the countryside in southeastern France, I really liked. Of course, the Alps were amazing. Excuse me. Alps were amazing. But, you really got to, especially when you're going through mountain passes and there's other cars, you really got to kind of keep your eye on the road. It's not kind of a laid back, leisurely ride. You're engaged. But riding through France, it was great. And especially on the /6, that was really nice. Then one of the places we stayed in Germany, we ended up actually, the Airbnb was on one of Germany's famous motorcycle road. I don't want to say it was like the tail of the dragon here. People, talk about that in North Carolina and Tennessee, but it was a real twisty road, and they're fun. Don't get me wrong. But I really liked that countryside riding in France. That was my favorite.
Awesome. Shout out to my home state of Pennsylvania there. I love it.
Yeah. It just had a kind of a similar look and feel to it. So I thought, it's like, man, Nick would probably agree with me on this. It just kind of had sort of an Allegheny feel to it.
I know that vibe.
Yeah.
Very cool. I'm jealous on so many levels, not just the bike, but the trip. It sounds super, super fun. Moving on, though, we're going to move into the Survivor Series, which is a new thing that you're doing on the website on airhead247.com. We're going to sort of alternate between the Misfit bikes that I do on my Instagram page and the Survivor Series bikes that you do on your site.
That's right.
So today we have a Survivor Series. It's Taz's 1981 R100 RT. Why don't you tell us all about it?
Yeah, this is great. So Taz lives in Brisbane, Australia, regular listener to the podcast. He's got the bike we're looking at, an 81 R100 RT with the appropriate faded paint of the era, especially that smoke paint. He's got a nice fade job on the paint from the sun. Taz, first off, I want to say, what do I like about this bike and just sort of his submission. So there's a great photo. We'll look at him here. He's sitting on the motorcycle. Nick, he's got the leg tats, Chuck Taylors, and a bright yellow sock. So this is just a great look for me right out of the gate. Wouldn't you agree?
Yep. Oh, yeah. It looks like him and I would get along real well around the campfire.
And he is a heavy vehicle mechanic too. So this is interesting. So Taz has got a great background as a mechanic. He owns a couple other Airheads. He's got a R80 GS 1980. He's got a /6 R90, old Moto Guzzi V700, and a CB 750 Honda. So I mean, Taz has got quite the garage full of vintage bikes. And so, here's what he was telling here's what he's telling me, and what we wrote about it is essentially he found this bike sort of as a barn find, hadn't run since 1998. I think it was 2001 when he picked it up. Basically, he went through the motorcycle, didn't cosmetically, he didn't want to do anything, but he did need to replace the timing chain, had to rebuild the heads, and some other work, that you would think a bike that's been sitting that long needed, all the seals, all the brake lines and stuff like that. But he's a big fan of this because it's a great travel bike for him. So big fairing, big windscreen, and he basically says, for him, keeping a survivor bike, and that's kind of why we feature these. And what I like about him is he's basically saying a survivor bike to him helps him appreciate, how well BMWs are made. A bike like this has an interesting story. It tells a story, and he wants to keep it as it is and continue that story. So, as we can see in a couple other of these photos, there's a great shot of him camping with his little campsite set up there, which is a really neat shot. And then, boy, this third one photo, we're going to feature the rolling hills out there outside of Brisbane, I guess. Boy, what a photo. Nick, what's your take on this bike?
Wow.
And have you ever thought about owning an RT?
I did actually own an RT. It was my second Airhead, was a 83 R80 RT. And yeah, that fairing, you can hide 3 people behind that fairing.
That's exactly right.
It is amazing how much you don't feel like you're on a motorcycle behind that thing. And that's not an insult. That's a good thing. It can go through rain, it can go through snow, and you can just sit comfortably behind it for hours. I did eventually end up taking the fairing off. I'm not going to pretend like I kept it on for, the entire ownership of that bike, but for the time that I did have it on, it was a fantastic fairing for, long distance trips and things like that. And that's why I love seeing the photo of him camping on it, because it is such a great bike to go camping. You can just load that thing up.
That's right.
Get behind that fairing and go. And I kind of wish I could see the rest of the bikes of his buddies in that photo, just to see if they had it as easy as he did on that trip.
Well, he did a great job, as I mentioned, going through the bike. It did need some mechanical work. But the thing about this and this whole idea behind, the Survivor series is you're sort of keeping the bike in the same physical condition, physical appearance condition as found, not altering it, repainting it. And that does tell a story to a certain degree. The other neat thing about this, I think, is, when you've got a bike that's this age, as I mentioned, the paint is sun faded, not uncommon for that era. Man, it just makes it so easy to just ride it and not stress on it. Take it out, gets muddy, rock scratch it, maybe it falls over, you get a little crack here and there, but you're really not terribly concerned about it. But as he said, this bike tells a story, and he just wants to keep telling that story. And Taz, I've got to say kudos to you for getting this bike, getting it back out on the road, thoroughly enjoying it, and adding it to a great stable of BMW. So well done, buddy. And let's just say, if you've got a Survivor Series bike, or you've got, conversely, one that doesn't fit into that and defies category, an Airhead misfit, we want to hear about them either way. So you can reach me with Survivor Series bikes, Airheads, at hotmail.com, or Airheads247, rather, with an S, at hotmail.com. And then Nick's Airhead Misfits, check him out on Instagram, Nick. That's how folks got to hook up with you on that, right? It's got to be an Instagram connection.
Yep, it's the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Okay. Or
spend way too much time on my phone.
Yeah, maybe you're listening, you're not on Instagram, but you've got a misfit that defies category. It's okay to send it to me. I'm not gonna throw it in the trash. If I get an Airhead Misfits email, it's okay to send it to me. Nick and I will go over it.
Exactly.
So yes, keep them coming. And we've got some great ones coming up, Nick. There's already some on the website. Airhead 247, but we've got a lot of great submissions that we're going to be working through that have just come in recent weeks. So we really appreciate everyone writing, taking the time to submit those. Well done, everybody.
Yep, exactly. Also, if you want to get a hold of me, feel free to comment down below, shout out me, say, hey, I got a bike I want featured, and we'll figure out how to get a hold of you, and we'll get linked up and all set up on that. There's plenty of ways to get in touch. So
yeah,
moving right
leave
along.
It in the comments, right? Stick it in the comments section.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So next up, we're going to move on to
one more thing.
Darren, go ahead.
One more thing. Yeah, before we move on. So there, if you saw this bike, saw these pictures, 81 R100 RT with the red fade, let me just say there is one for sale on Facebook Marketplace right now. I almost bought it. Similar condition as Taz's bike. 40-some thousand miles, all original, starts, runs, rides, looks good. I talked to the owner. His name's Saroj, and he's in Kansas City. It's on Facebook Marketplace. He's asking $2,000 for a running 81 RT. I think you could probably jump on this thing and do a flying ride. So just a little heads up, if this is something you're looking for, there's a great line for you, Kansas City. Look it up on Facebook Marketplace. You'll see it there.
Very cool. I'm glad that's just far enough away from me.
Yeah, I almost bought it. But I've just got, this just came in, and then we'll be talking about another R100 RS jigsaw puzzle that I bought a couple months ago. That's going to be shipped here. So I just had to cool it, Nick. Couldn't do it. Had to put the brakes on.
Pump the brakes. There you go.
It's exactly right. So, all right. Our excerpt feature clip today is from a good friend of mine out of Memphis, Tennessee, Leo Goff. Should mention what we'll be hearing today. We're talking about a pair of cylinder heads, a top end I took to him a couple months ago over the summer. This was a set of big valve Euro heads, early 78. So I think it's 44, 42 on the valves, 40 millimeter exhaust. I got a good price on these, and I don't have a plan for them. But I got a good price on them, and I know Leo can go through these. You'll hear in our conversation his sort of visual inspection and commentary on those. And then we'll be talking a little bit about what he does when he services heads. There's a little bit of science in here. So he really breaks it down. Leo is a wizard when it comes to this kind of stuff. He knows it inside and out, and I think you'll hear that in this interview. We also talk a little bit about, we jump out of the 247 zone. We'll roll back. We end up talking about /2 heads and what a lot of folks know as the Butterhead, the soft metallurgy that the /2s suffered from. And he talks about that and what the cause of that was. It's pretty interesting what ended up causing those heads just to have poor valve seat recession and just bad metallurgy back in the mid to late 60s. Should mention too with Leo, this is just an excerpt from an interview that I did, as I mentioned, three months ago. So what we want to do maybe here, Nick, is in the links here. If you want to hear more with Leo, first of all, he's a great storyteller. And he's one of the more popular guests we've had on the podcast. I get a lot of emails from folks saying, man, I just love listening to Leo tell a story. And so maybe what you can do here, Nick, is drop a couple links from some previous episodes we've done with Leo if you want to hear more from him. But as we mentioned, I think this is apropos because we were talking about your garage update and your head. So I know you put some ears on this before we put it on. What did it get you thinking about with those heads you've got sitting on your shelf now?
Well, it definitely made me think like I should send my heads off to him to have them looked at.
For sure.
So we'll see. I may still do that. Being that I've got a conversion bike, even though it doesn't have the /2 engine in it anymore, I really did kind of zone in on the Butterhead commentary. Like I said, I don't have that sort of engine, but it was just interesting to hear about what happened in Germany to lead to the eventual, bad metallurgy of a motorcycle.
Mm-hmm.
kind of interesting to follow that through. So I think that's what I really focused in on quite a bit when listening to it. And you're totally right. He's an amazing storyteller. I could probably listen to his episode over and over again and never get tired of it. So
yeah, I think if you can, we've got two episodes. I think there's 2 episodes with him from our first interview, and then also a third one where we again jumped off the reservation just a touch, if you want to call it just a touch, and we did a couple series on the K bikes, K75. So maybe if you want to pop those links to Leo's previous episodes down there, you can check in with him, and we'll bring you more of this conversation that you hear now sometime down the road. But for now, Nick, anything else we need to cover before we jump into this?
No, I think that's about it. Like you said, I'll put the links down in the description below the video here. Don't forget to like and subscribe, of course. Keep this going. That's kind of how we know that we're doing things right. Give us some comments. Let us know how we're doing. But for now, I think we're just going to roll right into the excerpt. So I hope you all enjoy it.
Toodaloo. We're committed to bringing you this podcast free of charge, never a paywall or subscription fee. And to help us do that, we rely on the support of our sponsors. We're happy to let you know the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America are continuing their free 1-year digital membership promotion for Airhead 247 podcast listeners. The only caveat here to qualify for this offer is that you are either new to the MOA or have not experienced the MOA as a member in the last 3 years. This offer is good for riders across the globe. So if you're listening to this now, no matter where you are on planet Earth, the offer is valid for you. Digital membership includes 12 issues of the BMW Owners News, an annual copy of the BMW Owners Anonymous book, full access to the MOA website with forums, flea market, and of course, all the money-saving discounts and roadside assistance plans. To join, visit 247.bmwmoa.org. Use the code AIRHEADS247 to register for your free 1-year digital membership. It's a quick and easy way to support our efforts here, and of course, it's free. Look for that website and code in the About section of this program.
Generally, on an over rev, either on a going past red line or on an over rev on downshifting, the exhaust valve will be the one to
Take the brunt.
take the hit, which this one obviously did. It's bent pretty good, and you can see the marks on it.
That, and when we looked in the port, that was the first thing you said. Turn it up, look in the port,
Yeah.
You could see the light.
Oh, you can see the light there.
Yep.
It's just that little crescent, where the valve was bent. Most of the time when the valve bends like that, it will take the valve guide and, oblong it a little bit, oval it out. So
Now, the other thing you noticed were the springs.
yeah, it's got competition springs on it. I don't know what brand they are, but it's got a inner spring and it's got a damper
Let me see
between
that.
them to
Oh, okay.
help with the harmonic. And those are all interference fit.
Now, that wouldn't have been on these if they were stock heads.
No, BMW never used that.
See, I didn't even notice that right off the bat. So the benefit to those is what, if any?
Well, higher rev, more, probably, maybe the bike had a different cam in it. It's all about valve control, at higher RPMs, make sure that the valves are following the,
So that just gives it a more...
more seat pressure and more over the nose pressure. And, it costs horsepower if you're not needing it, you know. And, you know, if the motor's, you know, if it's a race motor, if it's living up there in the upper RPM ranges all the time, that's a situation that comes, you know, that you do. But for most street riding, even spirited street riding, it's not an issue. It's you know, just adds to the mechanical losses in the engine.
So you're going to go through this. Are you going to put those back on? Would you?
No, I won't reuse those.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, you're putting it on a stock block. So what we'll do, we'll pull it down. Of course, we'll clean it first. You know, we'll look at the seats, see if the seats are good. Then we'll do a stem protrusion check to make sure that the seats haven't been machined to a point to where the stem protrusion will exceed what it takes to have good rocker arm geometry. Then we'll examine the seats for any signs of damage or micro welding. When I say micro welding, that's where the material from the valve seat and the valves get real hot and they weld together a little bit. And then when the valve opens, it takes away a little of the material. In over a period of time, you get what's commonly known as valve seat recession.
Huh, that's what that's from.
Yeah.
I always thought it was just the mechanical wear of the component.
That in a way too, but
If it gets hot.
yeah, it'll get hot, and the exhaust valve gets real hot, and the thermal path for cooling the exhaust valve is through contact with the seat and contact with the valve guide. And but that head gets most of its cooling from the brief period of time that it's in contact with the valve seat, and the thermal path is from the valve to the valve seat. You got a you know an iron or steel or an alloyed valve seat that's in this aluminum head, and it's got even though it's good and tight, I always put the valve seats in at 7.5 thousandths interference fit. That means that the valve seat is 7.5 thousandths larger than the counter bore. So you heat the head, and we freeze the seat in liquid nitrogen, and then we insert it with a special tool. So you want that, but still, even though it's good there, good and tight, you do have a little bit of a thermal barrier there, and then it goes through the head casting, and the heat is dissipated through the cooling fins here. And of course, on BMW, that's hanging out in there real well, but you still have your exhaust port here. And a lot of times you'll see on the head surface area where this area right here gets distorted, it'll be a little low. And it'll take a set after a period of time. That way, what I do to correct that, we'll set it up, and we'll take just a light skim cut to restore the flatness of that, and also to restore the RA, the roughness average of the finish of the head gasket surface.
It's got to have a certain.
A certain.
It can't be too smooth.
Well, rather be too smooth than not too smooth.
Okay. Oh, okay.
And they call for a specific texture, or what we call RA roughness average.
Interesting. So
and I have a profilometer that measures that.
I'm thinking of that like a grade of sandpaper. Is that a?
Fundamentally, yeah. Fundamentally.
Huh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. BMW is good in that you have an alloy head and an alloy cylinder. And aluminum grows 12.5 parts per million per degree Fahrenheit. So it's just getting bigger. Now, a lot of bikes, I bought a lot of English stuff, Harleys and everything. Well, the older Harleys, they'll have an iron cylinder and aluminum head. A lot of automobiles are that way, and so they developed special gaskets to take care of that over the years called multi-layer shim, MLS. So you can see that iron grows at 6.5 parts per million per degree Fahrenheit. So you see the aluminum is growing twice as much. So to maintain the integrity of the clamping force and the seal between your head gasket and your cylinder, you have to you have to acknowledge that you've got a disparity there, so you design a gasket that will do that. Fortunately, in the Airhead, we don't have that situation. They just have a good fibrous asbestos type material with a flame ring around it. Now, a lot of times, it's not developed on this head yet, but a lot of times, see that line around there?
Yeah, you're seeing you getting your nail in there.
Yeah, that flame ring will start to indent in the head, and you gotta take care of that too. It's all about clamping force. As you see, we have 6 bolt holes here. We've got two bolts, then we have 4 studs here. You see how the clamping force is universally, just about the same distance around,
Yep.
Basically, and everything. And so it all grows. That's why we have specific fasteners in the holding the head down, and that's why we have specific torque. And if you exceed that torque setting, it will take the head studs, maybe stretch them, because you're not going to hold this expansion down. It's going to expand. I mean, and it's going to take with it whatever's in its way, And if you overheat one, BMWs aren't too bad about that, but a lot of water-cooled motors, you overheat them, and you let it cool back down. Well, it has stretched the studs or the head bolts, and you've lost your clamping force. So then that way, in the case of a water-cooled engine, you'll run into a situation where it's lost its clamping force integrity. So you're gonna have some mixing. You're gonna have coolant getting in your combustion chamber. Sometimes you have oil and coolant mixed together, and that's a result of it being overheated and cooled back down, and it stretched the fasteners.
Now, you can't see any of that on this particular head, can you? You said this probably, with that bent exhaust valve, it might have gotten hot.
Well, I'm not saying that, well, more than likely this exhaust valve was bent as a result of over rev, either on a upshift or downshift.
And you're saying that too because looking at the valve spring, somebody obviously was hopping this up.
Yeah. It's been modified for. We look in here, somebody's done a little work on the intake port. And
Smooth
it up a little bit. It's you don't want that port. I think we talked about porting on a previous episode.
We did.
But that's kind of I always called highly polished intake ports window dressing, because it actually works the opposite way you want a little texture on your intake port. But as you see here, it all gets coated with carbon anyway. And on your intake, of course, there shouldn't be any carbon in there, but you're real smooth here, and you have a phenomena in airflow called a boundary layer. What really goes on there is that as the velocity of the port increases with RPM, you have a layer of air. Let me explain it this way.
Okay.
If you've ever been on go down the Mississippi River and look in the river, and in the middle of the river, the water's flowing pretty fast. Now you would think that water would be flowing equally as fast at the shoreline, but it's not. You notice the little swirls, the little eddy currents in there. That is a good way of explaining the effect of boundary layer. And the higher the velocity, the higher the more boundary layer you get. At around Mach 5.5 in most ports, you'll see about a 5 or 6 thousandths of an inch boundary layer. That's where the air is moving rapidly through the port, but on the port walls, it's not moving at all. And the situation with a smooth port wall, especially in a carbureted motor, is that at lower velocity numbers, the homogenized, it should have an homogenized mixture that was homogenized in the carburetor. In other words, homogenized, I mean the air and the gas molecules have combined. And but it don't always, it's not a perfect world. That's why fuel injection is so much more efficient. And those fuel droplets will fall out of suspension, especially at lower Mach numbers. When I say Mach number, I'm talking about we measure, computational fluid dynamics tells us that you have a speed to this port, but that speed is not the same through the port because of the contour of the port. So sometimes those fuel droplets will fall out of suspension and they'll land in the port somewhere. Then when you gag it again, the motor may take a big gulp of overly enriched air and it'll hesitate a little bit, until it cleans that out. So that's one reason a lot of times you hear guys, on old race motors, they'll be down gearing. A lot of times they'll blip the throttle,
to clear it out.
Try to clear it out a little bit. Your boundary layer has a big effect on that. So.
One of the great things about owning a classic 247 is taking pride in maintaining and repairing the motorcycle yourself. For some of us, yours truly included, there are some jobs that are better left to specialists. For me, transmission repair, that is one of those jobs. Airhead transmissions, they're mostly robust until they're not. Then, eventually, they're going to need some attention. That's where George Thomas and Air Support BMW come in. From repairing broken shift dogs, pawl springs, or adding a circlip, Air Support BMW knows how to repair your transmission and get it right the first time. Maybe you want to add a shorter first gear and taller fifth to your GS, or updating the shift kit on an older model to an improved later setup. George and Air Support BMW has got you covered. To get a quote on transmission repair or any other mail-in driveline repair, check in with George at airsupportbmw.com. Boxer 2 Valve delivers a world-class learning experience with William Plam in their downloadable video series. Get tips and tricks from William's 40-plus years of motorcycle experience in a format you own, commercial-free, with access anywhere, anytime. Each video contains content that's applicable to mechanics of any level, whether you're just starting out or have some experience with the spanners. You'll be able to take away some valuable information to assist you in your project. I know I've mentioned this before, but when I reconditioned my R90S a few years back, I had these videos on my laptop on the workbench. I watched each service sequence before digging into the job. These videos gave me the confidence and assistance I needed to get the 90S back into shape and back on the road. You can find the full listing of downloadable videos for purchase at boxer2valve.com. That's the number 2, boxer2valve.com. I want to ask you about, you mentioned this a little bit, or might have alluded to it a little bit, but the metallurgy on the BMW heads, cylinders, essentially on the top end, how's that different than other bikes of the 70s? So if you're looking at a cylinder head, or in this case, the valves, the top end on an Airhead versus, say, what else might we be looking at from a Moto Guzzi of that era? Were there differences in the metallurgy in the 247s?
Well, most of the castings are done with a 357, aluminum casting. The alloys that they use, no, they're fairly similar. Where you're going to find now, you go back a little ways to the /2 BMWs. They had a real problem.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, is that what was referred to as the
Butterheads? The Butterhead,
Yeah.
I know we're not talking about /2 stuff here right now, but that Butterhead situation.
Yeah.
The back then, I think during the early mid '60s, the German government made them take a lot of the sulfur content out of the castings, because it was not conducive to a clean atmosphere or something. I'm not really up on that whole, but I know that they did, and it made the alloy. It lost integrity, and it made it a little gummy. And so we had some valve seat problems with valve seats coming loose, but the main thing was the /2s had a bell-shaped steel insert where the spark plug screws into, and it was cast into the head. And over the years, as the fleet of /2 ages, this stuff starts showing up. And I've had them sent to me where it's actually blown those out sometimes, but just about every /2 head that I've gotten over the last 10, 15 years, that insert is loose. It starts to rise. You can see it in the spark plug hole. It'll start. I've got a set of heads over there that happened to, and it's a real problem fixing that stuff. It's what I do. I've got a little jig set up, and we have to completely set up in the mill and bore that steel insert completely out of there.
But don't you still have the problem of the poor metallurgy on the head?
You can't do anything about that,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
you can do other things to make it where it's
Okay.
not a problem.
Right.
So we bore that completely out. We take the valve seats out. We take the guides out, and then I'll weld up the entire area with a 6061 T6 rod. And you got to be careful how you weld it. And then you have to go back in here and you got to recontour the combustion chamber. You got to recounterbore. You got to put new valve seats in it, and you put them in at I use 7.5 thousandths, 0.0075 interference fit. And I put new guides in it. You got to check and make sure that your bores in the head for the guides are round and on size, and you do that with the measuring equipment. Then you put up when you get that done, and you get it all machined back up. You got a set of heads that's good forever.
Sure.
But it's a hell of a lot of work, and I just getting where I just don't even like to do them anymore. But what do you do?
Yeah.
Guy sends you some /2 heads, and you got two things going for you. You got to tell them the bad news. They said, well, I'll find another set of used heads.
You're going to run into the same problem.
I said, I said, good luck.
Yeah.
Now, BMW redesigned the /2 heads in the later years, called them LK head. Eliminated the problem. Another issue with the old Butterheads was they had now see where the valve, the rocker arm pedestals set on these steel inserts here, these buttons. Now on the /2 they have these pedestals that go down into the head.
Oh.
And they wear down into the head, and all of a sudden for one thing, your head clamping force goes away, but because your rocker arm is sinking down into the pedestals are sinking down through the head, your valve clearance goes away.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you find, I said, well, I ain't got any valve, guy called me and said, man, I ain't got any valve clearance. I said, have I got that much seat recession? I said, well, you could, but you probably got recession in the pedestal. The BMW had a bulletin on that back in the 60s and everything. And what you got to do, you got to go in there and machine it back down flat again. I use shims to shim them up with. And
boy, all that. It's funny just to think how one small change in the metallurgy, one component, all it causes that whole array of problems.
The BMW engineers probably didn't think that people would still be riding these bikes 60 years later.
There is that,
50
right?
years later.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned before, as the fleet ages, we're seeing problems we never saw before.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And Hell, I mean, you know, see them on, and it's not just BMW. Hell, they have Nortons I work on, the DSA, the Triumphs, and even some of the old Jap bikes and everything that I see. You know, you start to see a whole new number of issues that 15, 20 years ago you wouldn't see.
Wouldn't even think of.
And but the Butterhead thing is a serious problem.
All right. So
I actually looked when Vetch was in business.
Yeah.
I did all his heads and a lot of work for him, and we actually looked into maybe having some heads cast.
I was going to say.
You know, and every time I think, you know, how many /2 heads have I done in my career? Good grief! I would think, well, every /2 head that's needed to be rebuilt has been rebuilt. That's what I think. I think I've personally done 400 pair.
I was going to say at least 400 or
how
500.
How many /2s are still out there running around? Well, it's a lot more than you think.
Yeah.
And that's to the credit of BMW. I always tell people, I want to restore a vintage bike. What should I get? I want to do a Norton. I want to do a Triumph. I said, well, okay, we can do that. And I said, have you considered a BMW? Well, I hadn't really considered, but I like the old /2s, or I like the /5s. And I always tell these people, I said, you know, it's kind of like an old house. I said, with a BMW, you always have something to nail to. Now, you know, you get an old house that's rotten, you drive a nail, and it's being held together with termites holding hands. That's one thing. But with a BMW, you always got 90% of the time you've got a good foundation.
Yeah.
And that's very important.
Thanks for joining us on the Short Wheelbase Podcast, presented by the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America. To join the club, visit bmwmoa.org. You can find full-length episodes of the excerpts heard here on the Airhead 247 podcast. The Short Wheelbase Podcast is produced and edited by Nick Malozzi. Audio segments by Jeff Glover. You can check in with Nick at Airhead Misfits on Instagram.